So today we're going to dive into two really ancient practices that have been shaping human minds for, well, thousands of years: meditation and chanting. But here's the twist. We're not going to look at them through the lens of spirituality. Instead, we're going to treat them like what they really are from a scientific point of view. Two very different, very sophisticated technologies for the mind. I mean, think about it. These are repeatable processes with clear inputs and measurable outputs, and they're designed to actually modulate the hardware of our brain and the operating system of our nervous system. So let's get into it and see how these two pieces of tech actually work.
And that brings us right to the big question for this whole explainer. Silence versus sound. Which one is actually better for your brain? Now, right off the bat, we have to kind of unpack that word better. Better for what exactly? Are we talking better for focus, better for calming down when you're anxious, or better for the long-term health of your brain? You're about to see that the answer isn't just picking one over the other. It's really about understanding that we're looking at two different tools with totally different mechanisms built for different jobs.
All right, so here's our game plan for today. First, we'll frame this as two distinct paths heading towards a similar goal. Then, we'll get into the nuts and bolts of silent meditation, what I'm calling the silent switchboard. After that, we'll explore the mechanics of chanting in The Power of Vibration. Then, the fun part, we'll put them head to head and look at the science. And finally, we'll pull it all together to help you figure out, which tool might actually be the right one for you. Okay, so even though both meditation and chanting are often aiming for the same thing, a sense of well-being, clarity, or peace, the way they get you there couldn't be more different. Think of it this way. Imagine you're trying to get a restless kid to calm down. One way is what we'd call top-down. You sit with them, you talk to them, you reason with them, right? You engage their mind to guide them toward being quiet. The other way is bottom-up. You might rock them or hum a lullaby or give them a big warm hug. You're using physical sensation to soothe their nervous system directly. As we're about to see, meditation is almost entirely a top-down approach, while chanting is a profoundly bottom-up one. All right, let's start with silence. When we talk about silent meditation, we're not talking about just sitting there doing nothing. We're talking about an active, deliberate process of rewiring your brain's incredibly complex circuitry. Imagine your brain is like the central switchboard for a massive, continent-spanning telephone network. Millions of calls are getting routed every single second. Now, most of the time, this switchboard is just running on autopilot, right? It's connecting calls based on old habits and knee-jerk reactions. Silent meditation is the act of sitting down in front of that massive switchboard, taking a breath, and consciously, intentionally, starting to redirect all that traffic. And what's so fascinating is what's actually happening at that switchboard. On one hand, you're activating or strengthening two really key areas. You've got the dorsolateral prefrontal cortex, which is kind of like the switchboard's supervisor. It's your executive function. It's the part that holds your goal in mind, like, okay, focus on the breath. And it actively shuts down all the distracting calls coming in. Right next to it, you've got the anterior cingulate cortex. Think of this as the quality control officer. It's monitoring for mistakes. It's the little ping that goes off when your mind wanders and it says, whoops, we're off task, and helps you gently guide your attention back. Now, at the exact same time, and this is so important, you are actively deactivating or turning down the volume on another massive network, the default mode network. So what the heck is this default mode network, or DMN? Well, it's the brain's storyteller. When you're driving a route you know by heart, or you're just washing the dishes, your mind isn't blank, is it? No way. It's telling stories. It's replaying that conversation from yesterday. It's worrying about a meeting tomorrow. It's building these huge narratives about who you are, what you've done, what people think of you. That is the DMN. It's the network that creates our sense of self over time. But it's also the source of rumination, that feeling of being stuck on a hamster wheel, chewing on the same negative thought over and over. So by turning down the DMN, meditation isn't trying to erase your personality. It's just giving the storyteller a much-needed break. It's turning down the volume on that nonstop internal monologue, so you can just have a direct experience instead of constantly thinking about the experience. And this incredible study shows that this isn't just some temporary feeling. It's a literal, physical renovation of your brain's hardware. The landmark Harvard study found that after just 8 weeks of practice, people had actual, measurable structural changes. They saw increased thickness in the hippocampus. Now, the hippocampus is like our brain's context engine. It doesn't just store memories, it weaves them into time and space, helping us learn. A thicker hippocampus is like upgrading from a grainy, low-res map of your life to a super detailed, high-def satellite image.
At the same time, they found the gray matter density decreased in the amygdala. The amygdala is the brain's fire alarm, our little threat detection center. Meditation doesn't turn off the alarm, it just recalibrates it, making it less twitchy. It stops ringing the bell for every little thing, a stressful email, getting stuck in traffic, and saves it for the real emergencies. Okay, let's switch gears and move to our second technology, chanting. So if meditation is about redirecting mental traffic from the top down, chanting is a kind of biohacking that works from the bottom up. It uses physical vibration and sound as a direct lever to change your physiological state, which then, in turn, changes your mental state. We're basically moving from the silent cognitive switchboard of the brain to the resonating physical instrument of the body.
So how does this actually work? Well, it's this beautiful direct chain reaction. When you chant or hum or even just sing loudly, your vocal cords start to vibrate. This physical vibration is directly connected to a critical nerve in your throat called the laryngeal nerve. And this little nerve is a direct branch of the most important nerve you've probably never heard of, the vagus nerve. The vagus nerve is basically the superhighway of your parasympathetic nervous system. That's the rest and digest system. It literally wanders from your brainstem down through your neck and connects to your heart, your lungs, your gut. So by vibrating your vocal cords, you are sending a direct, rhythmic, calming signal straight up this superhighway to your brain, basically telling your entire body, hey, all is well, you can stand down. And your heart rate slows, your breathing deepens, and your body shifts out of that high alert fight or flight state and into a state of safety and relaxation.
And this leads us to this really powerful idea, chanting as a form of vagal training. Now, this is really important because it's not just a one-time effect. Think of it like going to the gym for your nervous system, seriously. Just like you lift weights to strengthen a muscle, you can use the vibrations from chanting to strengthen your vagal response, or what scientists call your vagal tone. And better vagal tone means your body gets more resilient, it gets way more efficient at bouncing back from stress. In fact, a pilot study in 2022 showed that just 6 weeks of daily humming improved heart rate variability, a key marker of good vagal tone, and it even reduced some key inflammatory molecules in the body. You are literally training your nervous system to be calmer and more balanced.
Okay, so now we get it. We've got two totally distinct mechanisms, the top-down cognitive rewiring of meditation and the bottom-up physiological regulation of chanting. So what happens when we actually put them in a head-to-head comparison? The research here is still pretty new, but the first findings are absolutely fascinating. And they don't really reveal a clear winner, but they do reveal two very different profiles for who might like which practice. Just take a look at this 2018 trial. Both groups, one doing mindfulness, the other doing a chanting-based practice, saw pretty much the same improvements in their depression and stress levels. So no difference in the outcome. But look at the adherence rates. A whopping 78% of the people in the chanting group actually stuck with it, compared to only 62% in the mindfulness group. So why the big difference? Well, when they asked the participants, they said the chanting just felt easier to learn and was more enjoyable. And neurologically, that makes total sense. Silent meditation forces you to wrestle with your own wandering mind, with that DMN, which can be super frustrating, especially at first. Chanting, on the other hand, gives you what researchers call a cognitive anchor, the sound, the mantra. By focusing on the sound and the physical sensation, you give your mind a simple job to do, which makes it way less likely to wander off into that negative ruminating thought loop. And the differences get even sharper when we look at the neurochemical signature each practice leaves behind. Both practices, as you can see, are really good at lowering cortisol, which is the body's main stress hormone. So they both help turn down that physiological alarm. But here is the massive difference. Chanting also gives you an acute spike in oxytocin. Oxytocin is often called the love hormone or the social bonding hormone. It's the stuff that's released during moments of connection, trust, empathy. This finding really points to a deep, maybe even evolutionary difference between the two. Meditation is often a solitary inward journey. Chanting, on the other hand, has almost always been a communal activity, like in a choir or a congregation. It seems like it's designed not just to calm the individual, but to literally bond the group together. So this all brings us to the final, and I think most practical part of our whole breakdown. We've looked at the different mechanisms, the different effects. Now we can start to put it all together into a kind of guide for making a personal choice. And part of that means being really honest about the potential risks and, of course, the limitations of the current science. Yeah, this is absolutely critical to understand. Meditation is not a one-size-fits-all cure, and it's not universally gentle. A major survey from 2020 found that 1 in 4 regular meditators reported having particularly unpleasant experiences. I mean, think about it.
For some people, when you quiet all the external noise and you finally manage to turn down that chattering DMN, you can be left alone in a silent room with your deepest anxieties or unresolved traumas. And without the right support, that can be really destabilizing. Chanting, with its external focus on sound and physical vibration, may actually offer a protective buffer for some people, keeping the mind anchored in the present moment in the sensory world rather than getting lost in really difficult internal states.
And, we have to be scientifically humble here. The research in this field is super promising, but it definitely still has some significant limitations. A lot of the studies are small, many of them don't have active control groups, which makes it hard to know if the benefits are from the practice itself or just from, taking 20 minutes to relax. A lot of the brain imaging stuff is done on these long-term practitioners, monks and yogis, who might be wired differently from the get-go. And we also have to be careful of what some critics call neural Buddhism. That's the tendency to see a glowing spot on a brain scan and immediately overinterpret it as hard scientific proof of some ancient spiritual claim. It's a bit more complicated than that.
So we come all the way back to our original question: silence or sound? What the science seems to be telling us is that there is no single better technology. There are just different tools for different jobs. Are you looking to engage in a top-down cognitive workout to really strengthen your focus and your self-awareness? Well, silent meditation is an incredibly powerful technology for exactly that. Or, on the other hand, do you maybe need a bottom-up physiological tool to quickly calm your nervous system, one that might be easier to stick with and even gives you a little hit of that bonding hormone, oxytocin? Then chanting seems to be perfectly engineered for that job. The evidence doesn't point to a winner. It just points to a choice. And in the end, the most powerful practice is always the one you'll actually do. So, looking at all this, which technology sounds like it might be the right one for you?